Hello everybody, welcome to a panel on Cloud Foundry, a Kubernetes serving kitchen. This is the latest installment in a perennial feature of Cloud Foundry Summits where we talk about the ongoing integration between Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes, and this year it's even more exciting than ever. With me we have Dieu Cao from VMware, Jeff Hobbs from SUSE, Bernd Krannich, I was trying to pronounce that properly earlier before we started the recording, from SAP, and we've got Simon Moser from IBM as well. So we're doing this recorded. Normally we would do this in person with everybody in front of us, so this is going to be a new experience for most of us here. Hopefully it turns out well, and I do ask for your patience and to bear with us. But folks, do you want to go through giving a brief introduction to yourselves, what you do in relation to Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes at your employer, and maybe, if you can remember three things, also what distribution or maybe primary Kubernetes related Cloud Foundry product your employer works on. So if we go from left to right, Dieu.
Hi, I'm Dieu Cao. I work for VMware. The distribution my employer has is Tanzu Application Service. It's a recent rename, so you may be more familiar with Pivotal Application Service as the name for that product. At VMware, I am the CF Open Source Product Lead. I work very closely with the teams that contribute to the open source parts of Cloud Foundry, mostly the core runtime teams. And within the foundation, I'm also the Cloud Foundry PMC Council lead.
Jeff.
Hi, I'm Jeff Hobbs. I'm Director of Engineering at SUSE and responsible for the productization of our Cloud Foundry distribution, which is called SUSE Cloud Application Platform, and as well as the open source work that supports all of that, and that's QCF, Quarks, and Stratos, among the other things that we're contributing into. And I work with our Kubernetes distribution as well, Container as a Service platform.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Bernd Krannich from SAP. I work at SAP Cloud Platform as a technical lead. Our Cloud Foundry distribution is called a little bit in a lengthy fashion SAP Cloud Platform Cloud Foundry environment, because there's also other environments that we offer as part of SAP Cloud Platform. I've been working with many of the SAP internal teams, but also in the open source with many of the folks in this call, plus additional more people, also obviously in the area of Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes.
And Mr. Moser.
Thank you, Dan. My name is Simon Moser. I am a senior technical staff member at IBM, and our distribution with related to Cloud Foundry is actually twofold. We have one thing which is called the IBM Cloud Foundry Service, which is a multi-tenant public service offering that is still based on BOSH, as well as we have a product out there which is called Cloud Foundry Enterprise Edition, which is a single tenant Cloud Foundry offering running on top of Kubernetes, and technically being based on the QCF work that we are doing together with SAP and SUSE in the past.
Cool, thank you. And last and absolutely certainly least, I'm Daniel Jones. I'm the CEO of EngineerBetter. We don't make a distribution. We just try and help customers use all the distributions made by these fine folks. So that's our input into things. So I think we're going to kill the slide now. Unfortunately, you all have to look at our faces for the next 25 minutes whilst we talk. Lots changed since the last time we did one of these panels. Back in Den Haag, at the last CF Summit, that was before the VMware acquisition of Pivotal had gone through. CF for Kate was a twinkle in a product manager's eye somewhere. And recently QCF has gone into production. We've got people from various customers making use of QCF in prod now. So quite a few things have changed, and we've got a few different approaches to how Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes are integrating. So if we start at the top, QCF, CFicates, why are there two different distributions, two different bundlings of Cloud Foundry for Kubernetes, and what are the differences?
I'll start off with that. So they start with, I think, two different philosophical approaches. You know, many of us, we've been trying to consider how we move Cloud Foundry most elegantly or most properly to Kubernetes. But there's also while there's the pure, correct Kubernetes native way, there's also the pragmatic getting Cloud Foundry working on Kubernetes. And just to make sure that, you know, there is something there that works right now as you make a transition. I would look at it, grossly speaking, as saying kubecf is more on the pragmatic approach. It's taking everything that currently exists from its VM heritage and making that work on Kubernetes. Now, it's already the third generation of that, so it's much more refined and Kubernetes native than previous iterations, which had been SCF and some of the Staccato work before that. But it's not absolutely pure ground up thinking, which is what CFicates is to take the essential developer experience that Cloud Foundry provides, but do it from first principles in Kubernetes, and that's more what the latter is.
Yeah, it's Are we doing hand raising?
I think if we aim for hand raising, but that was a natural segue, I think, over to the VMware side of things. So if you want to go first, you, and then we'll come to Simon afterwards.
I was just going to add to what Jeff was saying, in that I think both of them, they really value the developer experience and preserving the CF push experience, that simplicity for application developers, so they don't have to write 500 lines of YAML to configure routing and deployment policies and all of the various different things. And as Jeff was saying, CFicates is looking at technologies that have around the Kubernetes ecosystem and in the Kubernetes ecosystem, and thinking out about, how do we integrate with some of those more directly, and swapping out things like the Go router, things like Diego, things like the native staging system, with things like Istio and Kubernetes and KPAC, but still preserving that CF push experience for application developers.
Simon, did that cover what you were going to bring up, or?
No, I was trying to add something from a slightly different angle, which is so the user experience, as both Yui and Jeff have already been stating, is identical from a CF push experience. You wouldn't see a difference whether you're using kubecf or CF for Kate's covers. I think where one of the differences is when you look at it from an operator's point of view, like what does it take to run that thing, and I think this is where I like when Jeff said the kubecf is taking a very pragmatic approach. I would define pragmatic in that sense as someone coming from the wash world is going to have a very soft landing spot in kubecf, or at least a softer landing spot, because you would not have to learn all the Kubernetes concepts right there, right? Whereas someone starting on the green field, or really focusing on looking to use all the very latest Kubernetes concepts, I think CFicates is going to be the more natural match for such a person. Having said that, I'm really hoping that when we're going to get together for this panel in a year again, that those two projects will be merged finally, because I don't think that there's going to be the need for keeping them around, both for a longer period of time. Although I like I said, I think, for example, for migrating a BOSH-based environment to a Kubernetes-based environment is probably going to be easier accomplished by one versus the other.
And probably my tongue-in-cheek remark would have been to say, like, for the longest time, Cloud Foundry didn't have an answer for Kubernetes. Now we are kind of in the luxurious situation to have two, but I would definitely agree to Simon to say at a certain point in time, and hopefully not so distant future, we actually as a community need to kind of come together and settle on one and kind of focus our efforts on making one the kind of primary go-to target. But I think that's anyhow something that's already a stated goal for quite some time.
It's encouraging that there's lots of people nodding on that point. That's always a good sign. On the subject of the developer experience, are we anticipating any changes? I mean, I would have thought that the simplest approach would be kind of port over the CLI experience as it is at the moment. Are any of your companies looking forward to the next evolution and the extra features that maybe will bring in or changes to the experience?
So I'd say yes, and at some level no, because there's always extra stuff that you can add. But I think that's the key part, is in looking at the Cloud Foundry developer experience, just like the developer portion of it, comparing to all of the other projects which are trying to reach it. And, usually they get some pickup because, oh, they're much simpler to install, or it's so easy, things that have been actually corrected by making things work well on Kubernetes. They are always missing some of the key elements that you still have in Cloud Foundry. At the same time, and kind of a slightly different conversation, a lot of aspects. So one other thing, kind of a current differentiator between QCF and CF for K8s is, and as Simon was mentioning, so QCF is very BOSH manifest oriented and then leaves all the directing and management to Kubernetes. But it also doesn't break anything that isn't just like a pure VM aspect. And whereas I think what we see is a question that we actually asked a couple of years ago, and it's coming more into our face now. What's going to break or change at the API level, because something like if you bring in Istio as your routing layer, you are swapping out Go Router and some other internal bits that will modify some of that experience for you. So overall, the experience will feel the same. It will be the same. There will be a great amount of simplicity, cohesiveness, where you bring all these things and you get great visibility, tying into services, and that stays the same. But things will actually change, because if you want to do that first principles, and as we migrate more towards the single golden solution there, you will have to make some trade-offs, which it'll drop some things, but you'll actually be trading them off for something different.
And I guess migrating is actually a good point as well, because I believe like everybody on this call will have customers asking the question of, I'm today on a Cloud Foundry which is managed by BOSH. How can I move over to either QCF or CF for K8s? And like, what changes do I need to make to actually make that move happen? And I hope that kind of collectively we would say initially you shouldn't feel any changes, just as people on this call have said. But then like once we manage to move people over, then we should definitely like draw some benefit from the fact that now we have a Kubernetes underlay which can actually provide functionality that so far has been missing inside Cloud Foundry, like all the Istio technology, for example, that's coming in, that'll definitely give quite some additional functionalities when it comes to routing. And I would expect like many of those changes come as we speak over time, by introducing additional Kubernetes-based technology into the CF layer.
I'll go back to Daniel's original question there. But plus one to what Bernd and Jeff was saying. But like, what am I excited about for like changes or extensions to the CF developer experience? I think, and not even a change necessarily because of Kubernetes, but I'm really excited that the CF CLI v7 hopefully will be going GA this summer, and that'll be applicable for both CF for Kates and Kube CF and original flavor Cloud Foundry on VMs, and that'll bring rolling deployments as a first-class citizen to Cloud Foundry. I'm really excited about that being ubiquitous across all these different versions of Cloud Foundry. And as for CF or Kates and Kube CF, I think one of the most compelling things is just the difference in that getting started experience, how much infrastructure you actually need before you can get started is dramatically different. You don't need 20 VMs to deploy it. It could be 10, 20 minutes to deploy it and get started and get to know it. So that time to adrenaline, I guess, of feeling that CF push experience yourself in your own environment. I'm really excited for folks to be able to kick tires and play with it on their laptops, and then bring that back to their teams as a compelling developer experience that they could add on top of Kubernetes.
Would you believe we've been talking for 15 minutes already? We're running out of time. We haven't got much longer. Bernd, you mentioned about migration. Do folks have a feeling for where data services will be running? Kind of shifting stateless apps from one Cloud Foundry to another, or just changing the load balancer atop of a Bosch Cloud Foundry and a Kube's Cloud Foundry is going to be a reasonably straightforward process. But migrating the states is always the tricky part. Does anyone have any strong thoughts about whether people will be expecting to move their databases onto Kubernetes as well?
This is not entirely in our control, and it's a very interesting one when you speak with customers, because there's no reason that they can't continue to use their pet, well-curated bare metal DBs while they run their apps in a managed Cloud Foundry, whether it's VM or Kubernetes based. But of course, the talk is around everything rehoming on Kubernetes, and whether it makes sense for a large Cassandra cluster to be on Kubernetes is maybe a topic for somebody else's discussion. But some people are convinced that that's what they should be doing. And so then you do talk about the migration. But we don't stress that as being important. You can leverage it and it is useful, but you generally are going to be bringing in potentially other people for the expertise to say run, whether it's Cassandra or Maria or Postgres at a production scale level on Kubernetes. And from a customer point of view, say, yeah, if you want, but it doesn't bring you the advantages as much as the apps and app instances, which much more naturally fit that Kubernetes container, at scale management that you need to do.
But generally speaking, just to add to that, so I think it really comes down to what the data service is and what the use case is, right? Because so me personally, I've been running a bunch of a Postgres in a container inside of a Kubernetes cluster for quite some while as a dev environment setup thingy, and that works actually reasonably well. And I know for a fact that even in the industry, some people are offering commercial services with stateful databases, running as containers on Kubernetes. So those are even quote unquote certified for production use, whatever that exactly means, of course, right? But so it's not an entirely possible thing. I mean, of course, it comes at one point in time when the database gets too large, or the database's service gets too large. It becomes a question whether it makes sense to, use it in a thin container, or keep it in a thin container rather than on a more beefier VM. But generally speaking, like, I don't think this is a black and white question, Daniel. Like, I think depending on what your use case is and depending on what the data service looks like, it could be an either or. And like Jeff rightly said, there's no forcing function that if someone runs a database on a bare metal today and wants to continue using it, even if we move the Cloud Foundry, or if a distributor moves this Cloud Foundry on top of Kubernetes, that doesn't mean that you cannot continue to use that in the backend.
The service broker API is great.
Another relevant question might be like, are these the same people that run CF plus the data services, or are these entirely different organizations, right? Because, like, at least from the people who want to run the whole thing, I definitely keep hearing that they want to just deal with one thing, right? And like in future, that'll definitely be Kubernetes. So that might be a relevant question for any type of migration. Is like the backing service just a thing that somebody else takes care of, and then I don't really like care so much on the management layer that this thing is using, or am I the person that is running both CF as well as this Phosphorus database myself? Then I obviously want to have like an as homogeneous kind of management layer and experience as possible.
Yui, is there any official VMware line on this sort of topic?
And I think I agree with a lot of what's been said, that it varies, right? You'll have customers and folks who still connect to their Oracle databases running on giant racks of hardware, and the service broker is a beautiful thing for continuing to allow for that experience. And I think for any of the data services that currently have figured out how to orchestrate themselves well in the Bosch environment, I hope that there's a similar sort of journey to figure out, can you be automated, can you restart, can you bootstrap yourself and get started. Those things don't magically happen. Someone has to invest time and effort to make a data service that's mature enough to run on Bosch or Kubernetes. All of those things, the orchestration. I think a lot of folks tried to invest in operators to help with that orchestration, but a lot of data services, they weren't written with being 12-factor friendly in mind.
Yeah, I've been there, done that. I know it's very painful. We've got just under 4 minutes left. You mentioned earlier, Yui, about the CF4Kate's approach being more kind of greenfield and introducing new components. How many of the Cloud Foundry components, as we know and love them at the current state of the world, how many of those are going to be replaced with new Kubernetes native, maybe CRDs and controller kind of combinations, or brand new bottom-up greenfield stuff?
I don't know if I've counted them, but certainly Cloud Controller will stick around, and UAA is sticking around. But many of the other things, Diego is largely being replaced by Kubernetes. The logging system, and love with Logator and Logcache. There'll be a slimmer log cache that'll stick around, but we'll hopefully defer to something like FluentD for a number of the logging and metrics sorts of things. We're integrating with KPAC for its staging power, and I think and as you mentioned, Istio and Envoy for instead of the Go routers. So I think that's most of the major components within Cloud Foundry. A good majority of the underlying infrastructure is being swapped out, and we're largely trying to preserve the developer-facing parts.
That sounds like quite a big chunk. Does that present a challenge for the folks hoping to integrate these two things at some future state?
When you say those two things, which do you mean?
So, sorry, for CFicates and QCF, if CFicates is totally changing on the inside and QCF needs to kind of meet it at some point.
Yeah, I do think it's a challenge. Maybe Jeff has some thoughts on it, but I think some of the things that CFicates is developing is already being integrated into QCF. Is that right, Jeff?
Yeah, it is. And, I kind of finishing what I started with, we don't want to see two different CF implementations on Kubernetes. We do see the eventual merge of the CFicates and QCF as a singular Cloud Foundry on Kubernetes experience. And again, they're just coming at it from, top down and bottom up approach, and there will be a meeting in the middle. It'll just be interesting because we'll probably lose a feature side, maybe it's a command line or two that you got used to in the CLI that might fall by the wayside. But there is work involved there. That's what we all get paid to do, is to make sure we can integrate these pieces together. I'm not actually concerned about that. There's a lot of minor things. Oh, we got to get this right, and from a production and a longevity point of view. But the pieces that have been picked, that Yui was just mentioning, they all make sense. It is just more about the fine tuning and the integrating to keep as much of that simple Cloud Foundry experience while with all the expressive power, while making it just work nice, quickly, efficiently on Kubernetes.
We've got, well, I think we're just about out of time, but maybe if we can squeeze in one last question. What are you most excited about the future for Cloud Foundry on Kubernetes? Let's go around. So let's go clockwise on my screen. I don't know whether we'll be seeing the same gallery view or not. Bernd, should we start with you?
Yeah, sure. So actually something that we haven't talked about in this round, but I believe in previous rounds, is I hope to actually see some interest from like the Kubernetes folks towards Cloud Foundry, right? I mean, one thing is kind of keeping and growing the existing Cloud Foundry user base and community, but then like by moving Cloud Foundry on top of Kubernetes, I hope that we can get the Kubernetes folks excited, if not about like the whole of Cloud Foundry, then hopefully about kind of certain subsets and aspects of the Cloud Foundry ecosystem, which I think, like Jules is promoting the topic of each of the Cloud Foundry components by itself should kind of provide a value add, and people should be able to take it and just use it if they see fit. And I hope that like as a community, we can evolve in that direction, and therefore also get some mind share in the Kubernetes ecosystem.
Awesome. Jeff?
Yeah, I'd kind of echo what Ben said in that a growing interest base, because a lot of people have viewed the kind of the heritage Cloud Foundry as inaccessible or unapproachable because it's so heavyweight or it's too enterprisey. And I never got into Cloud Foundry because it was enterprisey. I got in because it was an awesome developer experience, no matter what size business or developer group you had. It was a great idea, and it is still a great idea. And to make it much more accessible for those who are even just tinkering, and much more approachable. And that's what I'm really hoping that other people will find, that this is really the easy application platform that you needed for any size developer group.
Yui?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this opportunity to grow the community of contributors and community of users through this hopefully simplified experience that's much more approachable. I think even for contributors themselves, the feedback cycles I think will be amazingly faster, so that we can start to branch out much more quickly and adopt more things that in and around the Kubernetes ecosystem as those grow and mature. So I'm really excited about that potential future and this opportunity we have in front of us to try to be much more in that conversation of the developer experience that makes sense on top of Kubernetes.
Are you trying to imply that maybe Pivotal stroke VMware's expenditure on coffee is going to go down when people are no longer waiting for Bosch?
Yes. I mean, why not, right? We're the ping pong tables aren't really a thing we can do right now.
We don't have table tennis tables anymore, so let's make the deployment quicker. Simon, how about you?
So yeah, I mean, just echoing what all the others have already been saying. I think there's the twist that I would like to add is I think there's also an opportunity that we as a community now can seize in order to get that interest even further heated up. For example, everybody who has been down in the weeds of writing RBAC rules and those sort of things knows that it's not a nice thing. If you, for example, if we would be able to rebase the UAA, the simple UAA authorization model and translate it under the covers into some RBAC style enforcement rules, I think that would be something that would be helping to bring the communities together and to even steer further interest going forward, and finalize that journey that we are on with bringing Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes together, not only from a community perspective, but also from a technical and enterprise adoption perspective.
Cool, thank you. Right, well, would you believe it? We've not even gone over our 25 minutes, we've done half an hour as well. There is so much that we could talk about. It's a shame we don't have like a 4-hour podcast format to work with, but unfortunately I think we've all got to go and do some engineering and make these things happen. So thank you very much to everybody on our panel. I believe that when this is broadcast, there'll be a Q&A and everybody will be available live to answer the questions that you ask during the panel. So please do ask questions. I think there's a hallway track. So are we going to be lurking on Zoom? If we are, then by all means, certainly talk to me. I don't know about the other folks, but it'd be great to catch up with you all that we can't see in person. Cool. Right. Well, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, DJ.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. See you on the Q&A.
See you in the Q&A.